He started with almost nothing, just $1 in his pocket and a vision that seemed impossible. While the world said there was no way out without a degree, connections, or money, he saw opportunity where no one else was looking. At 16, still a boy, he dared to enter a market that barely existed, betting everything on what little he had. Years later, that once ignored young man was signing million-dollar contracts and selling his first company for over $40 million. This isn't just a story about money. It's proof that courage, discipline, and vision can transform a single dollar into an empire that leaves anyone speechless. Gurbakhsh Chahal was born into a humble family of Indian immigrants seeking a better life in the United States. His parents worked hard to support their family, but the money was barely enough to cover the bills. Even as a child, he understood the weight of financial constraints. He wore donated clothes, lived in a simple neighborhood, and saw his peers enjoying more comfortable lives. This reality could have been a sentence of failure, but within him was a different flame. While many accepted their fate, he dreamed of creating something greater. As a teenager, he decided not to be trapped in the cycle of poverty. He believed that each obstacle was just a step in the right direction. What for others was misery, for him was fuel. This mindset began to shape the young man who would soon shock the world. At just 16, he began looking for ways to earn money beyond ordinary small jobs. Without capital, every dollar was precious. It was then that he realized an unexpected opportunity, buying used printers at rock-bottom prices and reselling them for a profit. The first investment seemed insignificant, but for him, it was his gateway to the business world. With each sale, he learned more about negotiation, customers, and the importance of seeing value where others saw junk. What seemed like just a small business began to teach lessons that would be fundamental in his journey. He discovered that courage and creativity are worth more than any initial fortune. Little by little, that ordinary teenager began to transform into an entrepreneur. Each transaction, no matter how small, was an invisible step on the ladder he didn't even know he was building. But the real turning point would come shortly after. Chahal discovered that the internet, still in its early years of expansion, concealed a largely unexplored realm of possibilities. Fascinated by the idea, he began to independently study how the digital world worked, online advertising, and how to connect businesses with customers. While his peers were preoccupied with parties and sports, he spent entire nights immersed in code, ideas, and notes. Few believed that this 16-year-old could change anything. But in truth, he was quietly engineering a billionaire future. Books and research were his weapons, and curiosity his greatest ally. And what he was about to build would amaze not only his community, but all of Silicon Valley. While still running small businesses to survive, Chahal began to notice a pattern on the internet. Many companies were trying to attract customers, but didn't know how to measure results or advertise effectively. It was a new, confusing field full of hidden opportunities. He realized he could build a bridge between brands and consumers using digital advertising, something almost no one understood at the time. At 16, he decided to found his first company, Click Agents. He had no office, no capital, no formal experience. What he had was a simple computer, an unstable connection, and a bold vision. The courage to start without guarantees was, in itself, a revolutionary act. He understood that he was not just building a business, but inaugurating a new market. Each line of code he wrote was like a brick in the foundation of a future only he could see. In the early months, Click Agents seemed like an impossible dream. Chahal worked from the tiny room in his house, turning every corner into a piece of his office. He called unknown companies, faxed proposals, and was often ignored or treated like a kid playing businessman. But he didn't give up. Every no he received became fuel to seek the next client. He learned to adapt his pitch, to exude confidence even without having anything more than an idea. Little by little, he won his first small contracts. The money was still small, But the validation was enormous. He proved that his vision had real value. And that was just the beginning. With each client he won, he gained not only money but also credibility. This credibility was the most valuable currency someone in his position could accumulate. In less than 2 years, what seemed like a youthful experiment had transformed into a lucrative and rapidly growing business. ClickAgents became one of the first pay-per-click ad networks on the market, attracting the attention of investors and major industry players. The 16-year-old, who started with almost nothing, was now seen as a Silicon Valley prodigy. Calls that were once ignored turned into meeting invitations, and small contracts became million-dollar deals. The rise was meteoric, but along with the growth, so too did the pressure to keep up the pace and prove he wasn't just luck. Still, he remained steadfast, determined, and visionary. And what would truly change his life was about to happen: the sale of his company for a sum that would shock the world. ClickAgents was growing at a rapid pace, surprising even the most experienced investors. The 16-year-old, who hadn't even finished high school, led meetings with much older executives, doing so with the confidence of someone who fully believed in his vision. The growth charts were impressive, and the revenue was beginning to attract the attention of larger companies. Soon, offers began to pour in. What had previously seemed like a teenage hobby was now seen as a promising business capable of dominating the digital advertising market. With each negotiation, he learned more about the corporate game, understanding that it wasn't just about selling, but about building something with real value. And that value grew every day. At 18, Chahal faced a decision that would change his life forever: selling his company. A large corporation offered millions of dollars for ClickAgents, seeing it as a powerful tool for the future of online advertising. For many, it was unthinkable that such a young man could refuse such an offer. But he didn't accept immediately. He wanted to be sure he was making the right decision, knowing he was handing over not just a company, but years of effort, sleepless nights, and dreams invested in every detail. After many meetings, discussions, and analysis, he decided it was time to take the next step. The deal was closed for a staggering $40 million. The impact of this sale was immediate and overwhelming. From a teenager who started with almost nothing, he transformed, overnight, into a recognized millionaire. Headlines were plastered all over his name. Young immigrant sells company for $40 million. Silicon Valley was talking about him. Investors were seeking him out, and his family could hardly believe what was happening. But deep down, Chahal knew this was just the beginning. The money was a huge achievement, but what thrilled him most was the confirmation that he had been right to believe in his vision. The impossible had become reality, and the young man who started with just $1 now had the resources to build something even greater. At 18, while his classmates were still deciding which colleges to apply to or looking for part-time jobs, Chahal had already achieved what many would spend a lifetime pursuing. With just 2 years of dedication, he turned an idea into a $40 million fortune. Suddenly, his life changed completely. He could now buy any car, live anywhere, travel to any country. But despite all the luxury at his fingertips, Chahal didn't let it dazzle him. He knew that money was merely a consequence, not the ultimate goal. His gaze remained focused on the future, not on the momentary pleasures that could divert him from his mission. This clarity of purpose was rare in someone so young, and perhaps that was precisely what set him apart. While others would lose themselves in excess, he turned each achievement into a springboard for the next challenge. Still, it was impossible to ignore the radical transformation. The young man who started out selling used printers was now making headlines and being interviewed, invited to speak at entrepreneurship conferences. He became an inspiration to thousands of young people who saw him as living proof that you don't have to be born rich to reach the top. But with fame came criticism and skepticism. Many said his success was nothing more than luck, that it was just a stroke of luck at the right time. Others claimed it would be impossible to repeat that feat to him. These voices were nothing more than echoes of the same laughter he heard as a child. He knew he needed to keep proving himself, not to others, but to himself. Every talk he gave, every interview he gave, was also a way of affirming, "I'm just getting started." And it was precisely this desire to go further that kept Chahal grounded. Instead of spending his fortune on extravagances, he decided to study further, learn about emerging markets, and seek new opportunities. He understood that the true difference between a temporary millionaire and a lasting billionaire was the ability to reinvest wisely. While the world waited for him to settle down, he prepared for his next move. He sought to understand how large conglomerates worked, which sectors might explode in the coming years, and where he could direct his energy. Life as a millionaire at 18 was just a chapter. The next move would be much bolder and more surprising. And what came next would show that he was not interested in simply being a promising prospect, but in building a legacy that would leave the world speechless. After selling ClickAgents and becoming a millionaire at 18, many believed Chahal would settle down. After all, who would need to work after amassing such a fortune at such a young age? But he didn't think so. Money was just fuel, not the destination. He knew that if he stopped there, he would be remembered only as a lucky break. His goal was to prove he could create not just one, but multiple success stories. This mindset compelled him to dive headfirst into new studies, exploring emerging sectors and opportunities that most overlooked. He wanted more than wealth. He wanted to build a legacy. It was with this in mind that he began planning his return to the game, this time on a much larger scale than before. Analyzing the burgeoning market, Chahal realized that digital advertising was still in its infancy. There was a huge space for new ideas, new companies, and new solutions. He didn't just want to participate in the industry, he wanted to lead it. Thus, the idea of creating Blue Lithium, a digital advertising platform even more sophisticated than the first, was born. With the experience gained and the capital from the previous sale, he was able to invest in cutting-edge technology, build a talented team, and position himself aggressively in the market. But, as always, it wasn't easy. Major competitors tried to stifle the new company's growth, and many bet he wouldn't repeat the feat. The pressure was immense, but the fire within him was even greater. The first few months were a true test of endurance. Chahal worked tirelessly, leading meetings during the day and reviewing strategies at night. With each client he secured, he felt confirmation that he was on the right track. Blue Lithium began to grow at an impressive pace, attracting the attention of not only smaller companies, but also tech giants. Within a few years, it became one of the most important online advertising networks in the world, accumulating awards and recognition. This young immigrant, who started with practically nothing, had already built not just one, but two internationally successful companies. And what was to come next would cement his name at the top of Silicon Valley. With Blue Lithium on the market, Chahal's ambition seemed limitless. He wasn't just running a company. He was revolutionizing the way digital advertising was understood and applied. The platform offered advanced targeting and results that impressed even the most skeptical. Soon, major brands began seeking his services, driving growth to levels no one expected. While many entrepreneurs his age were still struggling to make ends meet, Chahal was already dominating international conferences, being invited to speak and share his vision. With each new award he received, it became clear that he wasn't a passing success. He was building something solid that would forever change the online advertising industry. But rapid growth also brought new challenges. Competition was fierce, and tech giants began to watch Blue Lithium closely. Some tried to discredit him, saying it was impossible to maintain that pace. Others claimed that sooner or later he would be swallowed up by much larger companies. However, Chahal had already learned that criticism doesn't define a destination. It only strengthens the determination of those who know where they want to go. Instead of being intimidated, he invested even more in innovation and people. He built multidisciplinary teams, invested in data and artificial intelligence when few understood their potential, and delivered increasingly impressive results. His company wasn't just growing, it was setting trends. Blue Lithium's impact soon reflected in massive numbers. In just a few years, the company achieved revenues that placed Chahal among Silicon Valley's most successful entrepreneurs. His story graced the covers of business magazines and inspired young entrepreneurs around the world. He had proven, once again, that discipline, vision, and boldness were weapons capable of turning the impossible into reality. But the pinnacle was yet to come. In 2007, Yahoo made $1 billion offer to acquire Blue Lithium. It was the second time he had turned an idea into a monumental fortune. And this deal would forever change the way the world viewed the young man who started with just $1. The year was 2007, and Blue Lithium had already established itself as one of the largest digital advertising networks on the planet. Its ability to target users and deliver results for brands attracted the attention of not only investors, but also technology giants. Among them was Yahoo, which saw in Chahal and his team a unique opportunity to expand its presence in the online advertising market. After months of intense negotiations, proposals, and counterproposals, the news that would change everything came. Yahoo was willing to pay a staggering $300 million for Blue Lithium. For any entrepreneur, this would be the ultimate dream. For Chahal, it was confirmation that he had made history. Each meeting was a test of nerves. Each clause analyzed demonstrated how indispensable his creation had become. Deep down, he knew this was the moment that would redefine his life. The contract signing was a moment laden with symbolism. The young man who, just a few years earlier, had been selling used printers and struggling to convince small businesses to believe in his vision, now stood before lawyers, executives, and investors, signing one of the biggest digital industry deals of that decade. By putting his signature on the paper, he was not only selling a company, but also cementing his position as one of Silicon Valley's youngest and most successful entrepreneurs. At just 25, he had built and sold 2 multi-million-dollar companies, amassing a fortune that seemed unimaginable for someone starting from practically nothing. Headlines soon blared his name as the prodigy of digital business. The contract represented much more than money. It was public recognition of years of sacrifice, discipline, and vision. He had turned an unlikely dream into a concrete reality. But more than money, that sale brought something even more powerful: eternal credibility. Chahal had proven himself not just a lucky young man, but a visionary capable of repeating great feats. Coming out of the deal with hundreds of millions of dollars in his account, he knew he had a limitless future ahead of him. The business world was now watching him closely, awaiting his next move. He, in turn, maintained the same mindset: learn, evolve, and build. There was no complacency, no room for empty vanity. The billion-dollar sale placed him at a level few reach, but for him, it meant only one thing. He now had the resources to dream even bigger. Because for Chahal, the billion-dollar sale wasn't the end of the journey. It was merely fuel for the next chapter of his incredible story. After the billion-dollar sale of Blue Lithium, Gurbakhsh Chahal's name spread across the business world with astonishing speed. He was no longer just a young millionaire, but an example of innovation and vision. Internationally renowned magazines included him on lists of the decade's most promising entrepreneurs. He appeared on television shows, gave interviews to prestigious newspapers, and was invited to speak at universities and conferences around the globe. For many young immigrants and dreamers, Chahal became living proof that you don't have to be born rich or have powerful connections to reach the top. His story demonstrated that discipline, resilience, and vision can overcome any barrier. Every public appearance was accompanied by headlines highlighting his age, his humble origins, and the extraordinary feat of turning almost nothing into hundreds of millions of dollars. But with recognition came new responsibilities. The world now wanted to hear not only about his business, but also about his ideas for the future. Chahal was seen as a leader who could influence an entire generation of entrepreneurs. He knew his words carried weight, and that each piece of advice could impact thousands of lives. Instead of hiding behind his wealth, he chose to share his experiences, speaking openly about failures, sleepless nights, and the importance of believing when everyone doubts. This authenticity made him even more admired. While many entrepreneurs use their fame to boast, Chahal used it to inspire. And the more he told his story, the more people found the courage to begin their own journeys. He had become a global symbol of resilience and vision. His recognition reached its peak when he began to be called not just a businessman, but a visionary. On international panels, he was treated as someone capable of forecasting trends and anticipating market movements. Investors sought his opinion before venturing into new sectors. Young entrepreneurs saw him as a compass to guide them in a constantly changing world. And even with all the glory, Chahal remembered his origins. The boy who started with $1 and the family who believed in his determination. The contrast between his humble past and global prestige was his greatest source of pride. But deep down, he knew there were still steps to climb, that the story was not complete. Because global recognition was not the final destination. It was merely the stage where he would show the world the power of never giving up. With his global recognition firmly established, Chahal began to think beyond immediate business. He had already proven to the market that he could create and sell multi-million-dollar companies. But now his ambition was greater. He wanted to leave a legacy. It wasn't just about money or fame, but about lasting impact. He began investing in new startups, helping young entrepreneurs turn their ideas into reality. He created investment funds and support programs, always geared towards those who, like him, started with nothing. For Chahal, each new talent he supported was like planting a seed in a fertile field, knowing that from it could emerge new stories of overcoming challenges. His name was no longer associated solely with business. It began to symbolize opportunity and inspiration. He also decided to use his visibility to support social causes. He invested in education, created scholarship programs, and supported initiatives for underserved communities. In his lectures, he consistently reinforced the importance of not only accumulating wealth, but also giving back to society. This stance further increased the respect surrounding his name. Business people, leaders, and politicians saw Chahal not just as a businessman, but as an agent of change. He understood that his greatest responsibility was to open doors that remained closed to millions of young people around the world. This sense of purpose was what motivated him to keep going, even though he had already achieved so much. But behind all this movement lay something even deeper. The desire to prove that his journey wasn't a coincidence, but rather the result of discipline and vision. The boy who started with $1 wanted to show that anyone, anywhere, could change their life if they believed and acted courageously. Every company he created, every investment made, every word spoken in public reinforced this message. He knew that a true legacy isn't built on numbers alone, but on examples that echo across generations. And it was this mindset that led him to plan even bolder new steps. Because, for Chahal, legacy wasn't in what he had already done, but in what was yet to be built. Today, Gurbakhsh Chahal's name is remembered not only for the money he accumulated, but for the strength of his trajectory. He came from nothing, with literally almost no resources, and built 2 multi-million-dollar companies before he even turned 25. His story has become a staple in universities, lectures, and business books. But what truly set him apart wasn't the numbers, but his mindset. He showed that true power lies not in how much you start with, but in how you think and act with the little you have. The boy who once had only $1 has now become living proof that discipline and courage can open doors that seem unreachable. His life shows that it doesn't matter where you come from, but where you're willing to go. The lesson his journey leaves for the world is clear. Dreams are priceless, but they require sacrifice. Chahal faced doubts, ridicule, sleepless nights, and countless closed doors. At no point, however, did he allow this to define who he would be. He transformed every defeat into a learning experience, every criticism into motivation, and every small step forward into fuel to keep going. He didn't let fear paralyze him, and that's what sets him apart from millions of people who give up too soon. His message is simple yet powerful. You can start with almost nothing, even just $1. But if you have vision, discipline, and courage, you can transform that little into something that will leave the world speechless. And perhaps most inspiring is the fact that Chahal didn't just seek to become rich, but to build a legacy capable of impacting other lives. He understood that true victory lies not in achieving things alone, but in paving the way for others to succeed. Today, anyone who once doubted his abilities can only applaud his journey. The invisible boy has become a giant who inspires generations. And the question he leaves echoing is, what will you do with the little you have? Because the difference between failure and triumph lies not in the amount of resources, but in the grandeur of your vision. And if he managed to turn $1 into an empire, what's stopping you from starting to write your own success story now? If this story inspired you, subscribe to the channel now to help us deliver more motivational stories like this one. Turn on the bell and leave a like so more people can discover that nothing is impossible. And share this video with someone who needs to believe in their dreams.